Late last year, I bought my first bag of lumpia at a shop on Sunset Boulevard.
All right. Oh, shit. Sorry. Excuse me. Whoops. I'm walking down Sunset Boulevard towards United Bread and Pastry to try to find lumpia wrappers. Hello. How's it going?
This particular shop sold them frozen in huge plastic bags.
All right. And then 50 is how much? $38? I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
A few days later, I brought them over to a friend's house, fried them up, cut one in half, and examined it. They're good.
That's very yummy.
Yum. I wanted to make my own. A week later, me and my friend Justin tried to make our own without looking at a recipe.
But did you see if the pork in there was cooked?
The pork in there definitely is not cooked.
Yeah.
I made one with ground pork, one with sautéed mushrooms, and a dessert one modeled after Greek bougatsa, stuffed with lemony cream of wheat custard.
Okay, trying the first lumpia. Let's try it without sauce first. Cheers.
Good.
Oh.
Salt's good. Oh, it tastes good.
Honestly, they were good, but they were hard to roll, they didn't stay shut, and they cooked pretty unevenly.
No.
What?
Isn't that the whole thing?
Yes. I mean, yeah. I know that is a question that I have.
I liked lumpia, and I wanted to make more. So, I knew I had to talk to an expert. Ow! Dang it! Oh no. Come on in. Because now it's time to learn, to cook, to taste. Hello, I'm Cody Reiss, and this is To Taste, the podcast where every episode dives deep into a different food. Today we're talking about lumpia, that wonderful Filipino spring roll. Our special guest is Bettina Makalintal, who's the senior reporter at Eater. We talk about wrappers, filling, rolling, frying, and how to become a more intuitive cook. I loved it, and I think you're going to love it too. So, without further ado, here's my conversation with Bettina.
Why did you choose lumpia?
I think it's like the one thing that I've made in my life the longest that I just know extremely, extremely well, where like I've never written it down, but it just sort of like lives in my brain.
Can you, for someone at home that like maybe hasn't had lumpia before, could you take a swing at like an encyclopedic definition of a lumpia? Like, what is lumpia?
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's basically just a spring roll, right? So sort of like lots of Asian cultures have very similar ones. And I think like at the most basic form, like lumpia is meat and usually like a little bit of vegetables inside a like wheat-based wrapper. And then it's fried. So it's very crispy and like, yeah, most lumpia I would say that I've had in my life are like pretty no frills. Like it's like meat and carrots inside the wrapper.
Yeah, totally. Can you remember like the first time you made it on your own or first time you made it in general?
I mean, I don't think I remember the first time specifically just because it's one of those things that like my mom would always make it. And so therefore it was one of those things that like when I started being curious about helping her in the kitchen, it was a very obvious like, okay, I'm going to like help in some way or I'm going to watch her do this. And I do think that that was also a really big sort of like sign of my own sort of proficiency in the kitchen when my mom started handing over certain like lumpia tasks to me. And so like probably the first time I made it fully on my own was like in college when I was like living on my own and didn't have a lot of Filipino food near me. And that was sort of like the obvious one thing that I craved the most.
I love that. I love the idea of like there's like a hierarchy of how complicated part of the lumpia process is. And as you got better, what was the point where you're like, oh, like my mom trusts me now?
Yeah. So like the very first thing is obviously just like watching, right? It's like watching all the adults do it. But then as I got older, like the main task becomes like if you buy these Filipino lumpia wrappers, they all kind of come in a big pile and they're not separated. So the task that I would always be assigned was like pulling them apart. And like it takes a lot of dexterity actually because they're like very fragile and you need to like you need to do it like slowly. They need to be thawed the right amount. And so like the first step is just peeling the lumpia wrappers apart. Then like the like sort of once I leveled up a little bit, my mom would like let me fill the lumpia. And then the like final boss of all of this is like frying the lumpia, right? And so like only in maybe like the past 5 years has my mom sort of like, now I can do any step of the process. Like she trusts me to fry them. But like if I'm cooking with her, I'm like, I'll still always leave that step for her because it feels like the most like, right, like everything can really fall apart then, and like that feels the most important. But yeah, that's like that's the sign that like I was allowed to do things in the kitchen.
I love that. That's amazing. Was lumpia like a special occasion thing? Is it like every like Sunday family dinner? Is it like a few times a week?
Definitely like anytime we'd ever go to a Filipino party, there's like a chafing dish like full of lumpia, right? And like often those would be catered or they would be like frozen or something. So like always in a party setting. And like my mom would make them, I think maybe more often than most, just because I would like request them a lot and I really like them. But it definitely wasn't like an everyday, like a very common thing for us, just because like for one thing, it's a lot of work. And like two, like it is like kind of annoying to have to like fry all of these lumpia. And like it only makes sense to do lumpia if you're going to do like a bunch at a time. So yeah, like slightly more of a special occasion thing. Like if I'm going home for the holidays, I'm going to tell my mom that we should make lumpia.
Yes. Okay. I love that. Can you describe your ideal lumpia?
Okay, so my ideal lumpia is my mom's lumpia, which I would say is like more complicated than most people's lumpia. We always use like specifically the Filipino lumpia wrappers if we can get them, which are like a wheat-based wrapper. I looked at the ingredients list. They have a little coconut oil, which I think maybe contributes to their texture. But so they're very crispy. And the filling, like what I like my mom doing is like a mix of like half pork, half shrimp, and like very finely minced. And then a little bit of carrot, a lot of scallions, like a lot of garlic, some sliced up rehydrated shiitake mushrooms. So that adds like some nice sort of like flavor, but also like chewy texture. A little bit of oyster sauce. My mom also does like very thinly cut green beans, or sometimes as like a hack, she'll do a little bit of like that broccoli slaw that you get at the grocery store.
Nice.
So like something green and slightly crunchy. Yeah. And like, so the filling is just like very, very savory, very garlicky. And sometimes she puts a little cilantro, which I think is like polarizing to some people as an idea, but I personally think it works really, really well in the lumpia.
That's cool.
Yeah, so she makes her lumpia like slightly on the larger side, and then like, we fry them until they're just like very nicely golden brown. Yeah, that to me is the perfect lumpia.
I love that. That sounds really good. That's a lot more ingredients than I use, but it also sounds a lot better than the one I made, which is like very simple.
Yeah, I think it feels a lot more sort of like filling and satisfying, and there's a lot more like texture in it than the regular just like meat heavy lumpia.
Totally. Yeah, I definitely get that. Can you walk me through like beat by beat, like really granular, like all the thoughts that are going through your mind, and I'll stop you along the way and ask questions. And
yeah. Okay. So I think the first thing is like you need the wrappers, right? And so ideally these are like the Filipino wrappers from the Filipino grocery store. The brand is called Cymex or something like that. And so you like the first step is you need to make sure your wrappers are thawed, because a lot of them are in the frozen section. And so like the first step is like you are like pulling those wrappers apart from each other so they're not stuck together.
right.
And this is actually like a really good reason why doing lumpia is like really nice as like a group project, because ideally you have like one person who's dealing with the wrappers and you have another person who's doing the filling.
Yeah, I love that.
I usually thaw them overnight before in the fridge, so they're like actually fully thawed. And like because with the Filipino ones, they will break if they're not perfectly thawed. So just like ensuring, like, and like if my mom knows I'm coming home for Christmas or something, she'll put the lumpia wrapper in the fridge like many days beforehand to just make sure they're ready to go.
Wow, that's so sweet. I love that.
But if you can't find the Filipino ones, I'll like often will just buy like other spring roll wrappers. I often buy the ones from the brand like Spring Home. Yeah, so like basically any spring roll wrapper that doesn't have egg in it.
No egg.
Well, just I feel like when you buy an egg roll wrapper, like I think they just result in a really different texture, because like like getting egg rolls at the Chinese restaurant, like they are more like sort of bubbly and thicker.
Right.
And I think that is not the texture you're like generally going for in lumpia.
Right. It's like uniformly kind of golden brown, not a lot of like tiny bubbles or big bubbles really that you can see. Is that right?
Yeah, I would say like the texture you want of the end result is like a shatteringly crisp wrapper as opposed to like a chewy, thick wrapper.
Okay, cool. That's good to know. So basically you have defrosted your wrappers overnight in the fridge, maybe longer. You get them out. What do you do next?
So a lot of the spring roll wrappers, like the Spring Home ones, are a square, and they're but the Filipino wrappers, the like Cymex ones, are round. And they have like slightly lacy edges.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you have the Filipino ones and you've pulled them apart, like they will dry out. So like I'll usually like cover them with a damp paper towel.
Okay.
Like if I'm doing this all by myself, I would just like peel them all apart from each other, and then like they're not going to really stick together again once you've peeled them apart. So I'd peel them all apart, then like layer them on a plate, and then just put a damp paper towel over the whole thing.
Awesome.
And like the reason I say it's slightly different with another person is that like then you can sort of pace it out a little differently if you have someone else who's doing it. So if I'm doing it with my mom, right, we often don't have to cover the wrappers because I'm like peeling them apart like essentially to order or like to fill.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of how that fits in.
Okay, cool. So you've got all of your wrappers separated. We haven't dealt with like oil, like any of that stuff yet. Your next step is filling.
Yeah, so I'm making the filling, which is going to be, and like I'm just going to talk like it's my mom's version, not the like simpler one. But so then I'm just like putting all of my like ground pork into a bowl, and I'm chopping up the shrimp pretty finely and putting that into the bowl also. And then I'm just, and putting all my vegetables in. And I think the thing you like want to make sure with all your vegetables is just that they're all sort of like the same size, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because like obviously we're expecting everything to cook inside the lumpia while it's frying. And so I don't want the like carrot to be gigantic compared to the green bean or whatever. Some people I know do cook their lumpia filling separately, so that it's cooked before it even goes in to the wrapper, so that when you fry it, you just are making sure like essentially that the outside is crispy.
Yeah.
But my mom has always sort of like, and therefore I have always leaned towards like doing the filling raw, because like her reasoning is that like it turns out more greasy if you have the cooked filling inside the frying lumpia. So I think for us, it's always been just like not filling the lumpia too much, that like it's not like this giant log that'll take forever to cook, but but it's like enough meat that it cooks pretty quickly. And then just making sure the temperature is such that like it cooks in in a decent amount of time, but the outside doesn't burn.
Like you wouldn't cook the rehydrated mushrooms, you wouldn't cook the ginger, it would all be like fresh in the mix.
Yeah, all of that stuff we just like, I've always just done it pretty small, so that like, because like a small chunk of raw carrot is like fine. Like it's kind of nice to have a little bit of bite in it.
Right.
So yeah, all of that stuff I've always just done raw.
Are you shredding the carrots, or like how big is like is it like a mince?
I would say like a pretty small, like a dice. For the carrots, and then kind of the same for the mushrooms. I've always liked like having a little bit of a chunk of mushroom in the filling personally. Like I like having that being like, oh, that's a mushroom. So like enough that it's like visible, but not. I don't know. I've never really like grated them or anything.
Cool. What's the ratio of like meat product to vegetable?
I would say it like kind of is just a vibes thing. I would say like definitely nowhere near like 50-50. Like, like if we're doing, like I think if we're making lumpia, we're probably using like a full pound. Is that what pork comes in? We're using like a full tray of meat, and then it's probably like 3 medium-sized carrots or something like that, like enough that you see it in the mixture. But obviously like I said, like I mentioned, like the binding, like we want it to mostly be the like pork and shrimp paste.
Right. Okay, cool. And then the oyster sauce, that's not necessarily for binding, but it's for flavoring. Is that right?
Yeah, that's like usually what like my family does for flavor.
Cool. Are you just mixing to incorporate it all together, or are you thinking about like trying to like work the meat? Do you want to not work the meat? Do you not think about that?
I would say that I like mix it a little past incorporated, but I would say that it's not something I've ever really like been instructed about or like thought about super strongly. So I think like enough that it's like all really combined together, but it's not like you want everything to be worked together so the vegetables are incorporated and they're not sort of like hanging out on the outside, causing like weird air pockets inside the lumpia.
Cool. All right, that makes total sense. Did you say salt and pepper in there?
Yeah.
Salt and pepper, cool.
And so like in theory, this is when you can do the thing where you like take a little bit of your filling and like cook it on a pan and taste it.
Yes. Do you normally do that?
No, I think I just like, I don't know. I think I've just been like raised to like, it smells a certain way when it's ready.
The raw mix smells a certain way when it's ready?
Yeah. Like I can smell the garlic and I can smell the like oyster sauce and stuff.
Wow. That's cool. If you did fry a little patty of it, is it like how would you describe it? Is it like you're mostly tasting the aromatics, you're mostly tasting the porkiness? It's like, is it sweet at all from the oyster sauce?
No, I would say that I'm going for just like savory, but like I want to be able to taste like that there's like garlic and ginger in there, for example. And I want to be able to tell that there's like scallion. I don't think the oyster sauce should be overpowering, but I think I don't want it to just be like plain ground pork.
Totally. Okay, cool. That makes sense. That sounds delicious. Can you walk me through, I think you were saying you make a vegetarian version too. Is that right?
I do. Yeah. I mean, it's like something I like experiment with a lot. I found that like what I actually like is to do like mushroom and cabbage and carrot lumpia with like some grated tofu in it, which I find that I prefer sort of texturally and flavor wise to like fake ground meat. I would be using fresh mushrooms for this. So I would like cook the mushrooms, the cabbage and the carrots to like get some color on them, but also to get all the moisture out. And then I would add like the cooked vegetables to the grated tofu.
Cool. And like an extra firm tofu on like a taco cheese size hole grater?
Yeah, like the
Yeah.
biggest size on the box grater.
Yeah, nice. And what about binding? Like, are you thinking about binding in that case? And if so, like, what would you use?
For that, actually, like with the grated tofu, I haven't found that it binds badly on its own.
Are you squishing stuff together so it's almost like low fish?
Okay, in retrospect, I'm thinking that maybe I've used egg. And so I think egg probably will help. But yeah, like, so I wouldn't say like super low fish, but it has that kind of like it sticks together, but it's not going to be like ground beef.
Totally.
But yeah, so like I think egg would help to bind.
Cool. I'll put an egg in there. I love that. Or like maybe just for example, if someone's listening and they're vegan, what is there another binding you can think of that might help it stick together while you're rolling?
I mean, off the top of my head, I would say like, maybe even like a little bit of like mashed potato would help it bind, but I have not like tried that. So like,
That sounds awesome to me. I love
but
that.
I think
That's
in
a good
theory
idea.
it would work and it would be good.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds good. So are you adding the same aromatics there as your mom's? Like, would you add scallion, ginger, garlic? Would you add cilantro? Would you add oyster sauce?
Yeah, I would add all of those things, but if I were trying to do it like vegetarian, I would swap the oyster sauce out for like mushroom oyster sauce, which I've gotten at the Asian store. So it's like not oyster, but it has that vibe.
Cool, nice. MSG, would you ever put MSG in there? Or is that not really something?
I mean, I usually do. Yeah. Or I use
Cool.
like mushroom, like the powdered sort of like mushroom stock powder that is like basically MSG.
Is it the little granules? I have those. It's so good.
Yeah, it is the granules.
Cool. So those are 2 fillings. What's the next consideration? What's the next step?
Okay, so then the next step is just putting the filling in the wrapper. Like if I'm doing the round ones, I'm like gonna put it sort of towards like the bottom third of the wrapper and like just putting like a thin strip. I think it's like sort of like with dumplings where like you actually want to put less than you think that you should use.
Right.
So I'm like putting a thin strip sort of toward the bottom half of the bottom third of the wrapper.
Okay.
And if I'm using the square wrappers, I like personally like to do them as a diamond. So I'm like turning it as an angle. So it's like a diamond and I'm putting the lumpia filling here.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so just to give people at home a sense of the scale, like how would you describe how big the wrappers that you're using are?
So the wrappers I'm using are probably about like the round ones are about the size of like a dinner plate, like a standard dinner plate, but I'm like not putting very much filling in them. So it's like, probably like 2 centimeters high by like 5 inches long of filling.
Oh, so your lumpia end up being kind of long.
Yeah, like my mom like always makes them bigger, and so that's sort of my preference.
Interesting. Okay, cool. Because the sheets that I got were, I want to say like kind of like the shape of like nori that you would use for like a little onigiri or something.
Yeah. Well, I think I think a lot of people do them that way, but so like my family has always done them slightly longer. And therefore like using the whole wrapper. And then so basically like I put the filling and then I sort of think of it almost like an envelope where like the bottom part of the wrapper goes upwards to sort of cover the filling.
Right. Okay.
And then I like tighten it and sort of like compress the meat downwards towards the bottom of the wrapper.
Right.
And like also to do this, I'm also like taking a little bit of cornstarch water and like brushing all the edges that are going to touch each other so that it sticks together. I know some people use egg wash, but we've always done cornstarch water.
Cool.
And so I'm like bringing the bottom up and then I'm like making sure it's tight. Then I'm bringing the sides in and like making sure that's tight. And then sort of rolling the whole thing so that the like little cigar thing that I've like filled up is getting covered by the rest of the wrapper until it sort of seals on itself.
Interesting. Okay. This is where I started running into a lot of problems. I didn't know how to seal them. So first I tried water and that didn't really work. And then I tried oil and that didn't really work either. And it sounds like cornstarch water is the way to do it. You make a slurry, basically.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's what I've always done. And then you can do like watered down like egg and water, I think also. But yeah, I find cornstarch water easier.
And you're like, are you dipping a finger into it? And then like, okay, nice.
Yeah.
Sweet. All right, that makes sense. So let's talk about the square ones. Because you said if you get a square one, you turn it into a diamond. So you give it like a little rotation. And then you put a little log of meat on the bottom third still.
And putting the bottom point so that it touches kind of like the center of the diamond. And then I'm like not rolling anything yet. I'm just sort of like smoothing now we have 2 layers of wrapper that are touching each other, right? And so I'm smoothing it down so that they stick together, but also so that the like log of meat gets like compressed. So it's like there's not like a lot of air in between there.
Nice. So there is going to be like some double layered.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, nice. Okay,
so
cool.
at this point we have like a sort of like 3-cornered shape where
Right.
like the bottom is flat because that's where the meat is.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's at this point that I take like both sides inward and do those really tight. And so like to this point, like everything is really like folding.
Right.
And it's really the last step where I'm like actually rolling it to the top of the diamond.
Right. And then which points have you cornstarched so far? Like did you cornstarch when you did the initial like bottom of the diamond over, or did you start? Yeah, you did. Okay. So you cornstarched that to get it to stick.
Yeah.
Cool.
I mean, it's kind of one of those things where I think that like, especially when like you feel nervous, maybe you end up using more water as just like security that it'll stick together.
Right.
Yeah, so I think it's also kind of touch and go. It also depends, like, how much your wrapper dries out while it's sitting out, for example.
Totally. Okay, cool.
Yeah, and so, like, also, like, crucially, like, when I'm folding all of these, right, then I'll store them, like, on a sheet pan, for example, with, like, the seam down so that the pressure ideally helps it, like, stick together.
That's smart. Cool. I love that. Okay, cool. So we've gotten to, like, the folding, things are cornstarched in place, and the end of it is just, like, a tight roll, cornstarch water, seal, put down on a sheet tray.
Yeah, the way that like my family does it is just that like every edge is like enclosed fully, and it's just like tightly wrapped. So then it goes on the sheet tray.
Nice, sweet. It took me a long time to do this. And maybe that's inevitable. Are there any like shortcuts, like methodology of like how to set yourself up for like economy of motion, so you're not wasting like energy or
totally.
time?
If you're doing it by yourself, I think the best thing you can do is do it in like stages, right? So like you're doing all the peeling at the same time, you're doing all the filling, right? Like sometimes I watch these videos of like these like Filipino aunties just like doing this like extremely fast, right? And so they're going to do like 100 at once. And like she's using like a piping bag to like fill all of the wrappers at once, for example, right? So like just like setting it up like that, where you're doing all of one step at a time.
Right.
And then you like do your next step where you like fold all of them, right? And then you fry them all at once. So you're not kind of going in between steps. But this is again, like, this is why like this is such a good group project, because it's like really helpful for one person to be like, it's easy to portion this out into like different people, where it's like one person's peeling, one person's filling, one person's folding, and then at that point you fry.
Yes. Okay, cool. That makes total sense. When you're not using a piping bag, are you using a spoon or using like the claw fingers?
I like generally use like 2 spoons, like one to scoop it up and then one spoon to like sort of put it onto the wrapper and like move it around.
Nice.
I have like personally kind of like been using a piping bag sometimes when I do them at home, like on my own, because I do like I don't really like. It's nice to not touch it. Like it's nice to have like a really sort of like uniform amount of filling. But yeah, my mom does not do the piping bag.
She has 2 spoons?
Yeah.
Wow. Piping bag's that's cool. I like that. So let's get into like, it seems to me we're at like cooking, fat, vessel, like that kind of world. Like your lumpias are filled. What's next?
Oh, you'll hear all about frying soon, but first, a word from our sponsors. Today's is brought to you by Words of Affirmation. If you like this episode, why don't you let me know? Sometimes it just feels like I'm screaming into the void. Now, back to my conversation with Bettina.
Your lumpias are filled. What's next?
Okay, so then the next step is frying them, which is like the most important and like possibly like daunting step. And so generally I am doing that in like either like a Dutch oven with a lot of like a pretty generous amount of oil, or I'm doing it in like a pretty in like a cast iron pan, like something that's like sturdy and like heavy bottomed, that can be filled with like a lot of oil, but also like obviously still have like clearance to the top of it.
Right. Cool. So like, if you were using a like 5-quart Dutch oven, would you put like a quart of oil in there? Would it be like halfway full?
It would probably be about halfway full.
Wow, that's crazy.
Like a couple of inches, but like, I generally at home, I'm not doing it in the Dutch oven. Like I'm just going to do it in like a cast iron pan with like a decent amount of oil.
Cool. So there would still be enough oil that the entire thing is submerged.
Yeah, and that they'll float. Like I think that the whole goal is that they like float in the oil, right? And they don't, because if you use like too little oil, like the risk is they'll like go to the bottom, like it'll sink to the bottom, and then your like wrapper sticks, and it's a disaster,
Yes.
right? So being generous with the oil is good, because it sort of guarantees that they'll like float around in there.
Okay, cool. And what kind of oil are you using?
I always just use a neutral oil. So like, honestly, if I'm making lumpia, it's like whatever's the cheapest neutral oil. So like canola or something. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, I got canola oil. Okay, cool. So what about like temperature? Like how do you monitor temperature? What's the ideal temperature? What's your like strategy on like maintaining it as you add lumpia to it?
Yeah, totally. So I would say I think that when I wrote my recipe, I think I said 350. So like you want it to be like around medium high heat. Like you want it to be like essentially what we're trying to go for is that it makes the wrapper like get slowly golden, right? And then like as the inside cooks, but it's not like immediately turning dark brown before the inside has the time to cook. So like I think going for actually like a sort of lower temperature and just kind of cooking it for longer tends to like yield the best results. I think the way that I always used to check it when I was growing up was like it's like when you put like a handle of a wooden spoon in and it starts to bubble around it was like generally when it's ready to go. And so then I'm like I'm sort like slowly placing each lumpia into the oil. And like laying it gently, and like you always want to like plop it away from you, right, so that it doesn't splatter onto you.
Totally.
And so then just like so like putting each lumpia in and making sure they have room in between them. So I think that like it don't like crowd the pan, for example, and so making sure they have like a couple of inches between each lumpia so that they are not just like making bubbles all over each other.
Right. Okay, cool. Are you using a thermometer, or are you like testing the wooden handle and just going to town?
I'm usually personally doing the wooden handle and then like going to town.
Nice.
And it'd probably be a lot easier with a thermometer, but
yeah.
you know.
Totally. Yeah. Could you describe the ideal like color that you're going for?
I mean, I would say usually like the color of like a good croissant, right? Like from like an artisanal bakery, right? Like not a Sam's Club croissant that's like very light, but like pretty decently evenly colored and tawny, like a horse or something.
Tawny like a horse.
But like one thing I think is also helpful is to just like have like a tester lumpia that is like your, it's like the first pancake. So like take that one, like once you think it looks good, take that one out. And like if you have, and like ideally this is where a thermometer is good, is check the temperature of the meat and then sort of see where you're at.
Right.
And
cool.
like adjust accordingly for the other lumpia. I will say the one thing that like my mom always used as a cue when I was growing up was being like, right, like when you first put it in, it's like if there's more bubbles, for example, like it's more like aggressively bubbling when it's like starting to cook. And like she would always say like once the oil is like quiet and like once it stops bubbling, that's like the sign that it's like done or almost done.
Cool.
And so I always just also watch out for that. Because I think it means like the moisture has gone away or something.
Right. Totally. That makes sense. I was having this issue where as I fried them, they floated, but they only wanted to float. They would like, I couldn't turn them over on the other side. Like they only wanted to be one side up and one side down. Like they float. I would like turn them over and they would just roll right back around.
Well, or maybe it's like, well, I think that's also like maybe one reason why it's like good to like really like make the lumpia as tight as you can. So there's like not air pockets and stuff.
Right. Yes, that's totally possible. I could have just had a bunch of air in there. And you kind of answered a question I had, which was, what implements do you have on hand during a frying session? Is it you're using tongs?
Yeah. So in this case, I would usually be using tongs. And then like on the side, I would have like a baking sheet with like a cooling rack on top of it to transfer them. I would probably have like a metal spoon just in case I need to like fish anything out. But yeah, ideally, you're not going to have a lot of stuff to skim.
Nice. Okay, cool. So I think like at that point you've cooked them until they're tawny like a horse, and then you put them onto a rack to cool a little bit. What about dipping sauce, accoutrement? Like, have you already started these? Do you use a dipping sauce? What is your dipping sauce?
Yeah, totally. People have very strong feelings on this. So I think like the three main schools are you do sort of like garlic in vinegar or like. Oh, no, onion and vinegar. Obviously, this is not my school of thought. Like a sort of vinegar-based dipping sauce. Or you do banana ketchup. Or you do my personal preference, which is like sweet chili sauce. And so ideally, like most of those, right, like the sweet chili sauce and the ketchup are just like coming out of the fridge. So it's not really a lot of prep. But yeah, so I would do one of those. And then like I personally always want lumpia with rice. So I'm always making sure that like before I've even done the lumpia that there is like rice cooking.
Cool. Short grain rice?
Like for Filipino food, I prefer jasmine.
Jasmine rice. Cool. Nice. You'd have pre-made banana ketchup or pre-made sweet chili sauce, and you would use that. And I saw a brand of sweet chili sauce. Do you have like a brand that you're faithful to?
I usually buy Mayploy, but also like those I feel like last like for literally like 5 years in the fridge. So it is kind of just like whatever I ended up buying.
Totally. Yes. That is the brand that I saw. And so I tried to make have you ever tried to make your own version of that?
No. I'm like, I don't know. I'm like condiment sort of neutral enough that I would never try to make my own.
So interesting. That's great to know. I should have just bought that. What I ended up doing was ketchup, a bunch of white vinegar, a bunch of sugar, granulated garlic, granulated onion, or like minced or like dried minced garlic and onion, chili flakes, water, cornstarch syrup, slurry.
Nice. Okay, that sounds good. I mean, it's like kind of like approximating banana ketchup, basically.
Is that what banana ketchup? I actually don't know that I've had banana ketchup. Is banana ketchup more like a sweet chili sauce than it is like a ketchup?
Or it's just like sweeter and it has a like somewhat gelatinous texture. So I feel like, yeah, like the cornstarch maybe is helping in that pursuit of that.
Yes, definitely. So your ideal is sweet chili sauce?
Yeah. Which like I think
cool.
this is why I like having such a savory lumpia filling. So like because I like know that I'm gonna have like the sweet thing with it.
Yes. Okay, cool. And rice. So I guess I didn't even think about asking this, but like walk me through like eating it. Like what? Like are you taking a bite of? Are you dipping a bite of lumpia in the sauce, taking a bite, eating a scoop of rice? Is there anything on the rice? Like what's your mindset when you're eating it?
Yeah, totally. Okay, so like the like one crucial thing too is I'm always eating like at least 2 lumpia before we've even finished making the whole batch. And like again, these are like big lumpia. I feel like when I am like making lumpia, my stomach capacity suddenly like increases by like 10%. But so I'm like taking the fresh lumpia and then I'm just like getting a plate with like and putting rice on it, and then I'm just like putting a little container of sweet chili sauce next to it, and like I like to just like dip the lumpia into the sauce, and then you have like and then just like also eating this entirely with my hands, and then like eating just like grabbing a scoop of rice after that.
Oh, nice. Okay, cool.
So like lumpia bite followed by a rice bite.
Yum. Okay, cool. That's interesting. I hadn't even thought of rice, honestly.
I mean, I think like a lot of the time when you have it in like a restaurant or party setting, like there isn't the rice, but I've just always been used to like, this is like the main dish and then I have to have the rice with it.
Yeah, totally. That makes sense. I love that. Okay, what about like dessert? Like what about turon? Or what about like other, like do you ever make dessert lumpia?
I like don't have a sweet tooth, so I'm like not personally into the effort of like all of this to have, but like if I'm making turon, I'll buy frozen turon.
Cool. Nice. Okay, I have a few more questions.
Oh, wait, I have one also helpful thing to suggest.
Please.
Well, like once you have all the lumpia filled, right? And they're filled and they're folded and you have them on a baking sheet. You can also just like, that's a good point to like, you can just put that baking sheet in the freezer so they freeze individually. Like have them so they're not touching each other, obviously. So then you can like freeze the lumpia and then throw them in a Ziploc bag. So like,
wow.
Because it only makes sense to do lumpia if you're going to do like a full batch and like the whole package or whatever.
Right.
But if you don't like need to cook like 20 or whatever, you can just freeze the others for the future.
That's really smart. That's what I do with cookies. I always make a double batch of cookies and then I like portion them, freeze them, and then put them in a bag, and then I can make like one cookie at a time.
Nice. What was your question? Sorry.
Is there any like common mistakes, things to keep in mind, things to avoid, things you think like someone that had never like me had never made lumpia before might run into, and how to avoid them?
Yeah, I think it's really just like be cautious with the amount of filling, like use less than you think that you'll need. Make sure that just like to wrap it really, really tightly, like make sure it doesn't feel floppy. It feels like it's really like, even like obviously you're overlapping the wrapper, but just like make sure it's all really tight. And then just like, you have to just be confident when you're frying, right? You can't be like scared of the oil. You have to do everything very intentionally, like placing things very gently and like confidently. But yeah, I think it's one of those things that like once you've done it a few times, it becomes much easier, right? Like it's also like it's hard to explain how to fold a lumpia wrapper unless you're like looking at it.
Right.
But yeah, I think it's like one of those things that like is worth the initial like hurdle of the project.
Cool. I love that. I want to like kind of maybe just ask you a little bit about cooking in general, because first of all, thank you for walking me through lumpia. That was like incredibly awesome and answered so many questions that I had last night and then I'm sure I'll have in the future. And I really appreciate it. It's awesome.
Yeah, of course.
And zooming out from lumpia, like the goal of the podcast is to kind of like, the hope is that it can help people become more intuitive cooks at home, less recipe dependent, can like start cooking with a little bit more confidence, like improvisationally, and cook things that are, to their own taste. So I'm curious, like, do you consider yourself an intuitive cook? Are you often using recipes? Are you often like doing it willy-nilly style? Like, what kind of cook are you?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I'm like very much an intuitive cook. It's very like cravings and vibes guided. I have a lot of cookbooks and I mostly just like my approach to recipes is very much like I will read the title and the head note and the broad strokes and like figure out what's in it and then I'm kind of for the most part ignoring like everything else like in my day to day. So like sometimes I'll look at recipes for like inspiration, but mostly everything I'm cooking is just like out of my own head, like making it up as I go.
Totally. I'm the same way. Like, were you always that way? Or did you start cooking by making recipes?
I think like I would definitely cook from recipes more when I was like a teenager, right? And it wasn't like I was cooking very often, so it was just like one project that was easy to accomplish.
Yeah.
But in like my whole adult life, I've like very much been like not really a recipe person, which is also kind of like I think my mom was also just very good at like improvising when she was cooking. So I think I just like learned a lot of that from her where it's like, oh, like we can just turn this into whatever, right? And like these things will make everything taste good.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. What do you think are the like important principles or skills for people to learn to transition from being like, recipe dependent cooks to being able to kind of improvise?
Yeah, totally. I think it's like kind of just understanding like what purpose like each thing serves in a recipe, right? Like I think it's helpful to like look at a recipe and like in this and just be like, okay, like why is this sumac in here, right? And like it's because it's like adding something tart, right? So like really or like, why are we doing a 3-step dredge this way? Like it's because you need the flour so that the egg adheres onto it so then the breadcrumbs can stick to that, right? So I think it's like looking at recipes and understanding like why is this step happening? And at that point you can sort of understand like how can I can apply that step to something else, right? Like I can do the same breading on like an egg instead of a chicken cutlet or whatever. I mean, that's kind of harder, but like in theory.
No, yeah.
But so I think it's just like figuring out, like looking at a recipe and understanding like why am I doing this, as opposed to just like taking a recipe and saying like I just have to do this, like in this succession.
Yes. Yeah. How do you get to the place where you can even look at a recipe and see through to the why behind each step?
I mean, I think I'm like blanking right now, obviously, but I do think there are some recipe developers who do write their recipes acknowledging that like, like add this thing for acid or do this step for this, right? And I think a lot of it too is also just like, for example, I do think it's really helpful when recipe developers use cues that are not time, right? Like it's like fry the garlic until it smells like this or it feels this way, right? So you're understanding sort of like the purpose, not just like do it for 10 minutes, regardless of whatever. And I do think it's helpful to just like think about like, why am I doing this step? And I think sometimes also that's why it can be helpful to like watch recipe content and like cooking content on like YouTube, specifically when it's like an experienced chef who's explaining things, because they are sort of like like kind of saying like what you want or like in a way that maybe a cookbook isn't always doing.
Yeah, totally. I think, yeah, you mentioned YouTube. Like, what do you think is the most helpful educational food media that's out there?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's like I was really like I was like a Food Network kid, right? And just like watched a lot of that stuff ambient. So I think I learned a lot from like I mean, what was the Alton Brown show? The science-y one?
Yes.
Good Eats?
Good Eats, yeah, totally, yeah.
So like, like for example, I learned a lot from that, just like, because I do think he kind of did get a little science-y. But in terms of new stuff, yeah, like I think Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat is really good. Or like thinking about like a new cookbook that tries to like answer these questions. Like I think Sola El-Wayli's cookbook is really helpful because she like does kind of break it down into like technique and like purpose behind things. I think I'm always thinking about like what role an ingredient is playing. Like I cook a lot of like vegetarian stuff just because I want to, right? So that doesn't mean I'm like not looking at a meat recipe still. I'm like looking at the meat recipe and I'm like, okay, what role does like the chicken breast serve here?
Right.
And like often it's like that we have something that is like texturally dense. It's something that gets, crisp on the side. It's something that like, is physically sturdy. And so I think there I'm like thinking about that and being like, okay, what are other things that do that? So, like tofu that's pressed or like frozen might also serve that function, or like a hunk of cauliflower can also be sort of like dense and, grounding in that way. Like just thinking about like, what is this doing here and what is it giving to me in this experience, and then figuring out like what else can do that.
Yeah, I think like that made me think of the like wheel of acidity and salt, fat, acid, heat, where it's like cuisines and their source of acidity. And I feel like that was really educational for me, and I think it's applicable to like also sweetness and savoriness. Like, and maybe I don't know if this is right, but I think like in some ways you can look at different cuisines as being a collection of you know, their sources of acidity and fat and sweetness, and like the difference between making an Italian braise and a French braise might be the difference in like a couple of those things. They're like little levers you play with.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to think about it.
Do you have any general advice for aspiring cooks to get to that place where they can approach cooking critically like that and in the present moment?
I mean, I think my like biggest advice for people is that I think that to be a good cook, you like have to know what you like, right? I really love eggplant, and I know that if I have eggplant around, I will feel some sort of inspiration around it, right? So I think it's just like knowing like what vegetables you like and like what speaks to you and like what you enjoy eating, and that letting that sort of guide it, because I'm never like going into a week with a meal plan in mind. Really, I'm like kind of like, oh, I know I like got this really good like squash and I can't wait to eat it, and I know that, you know, and I think that is really helpful guidance. Just know that like there are things that you feel excited to cook or excited to eat no matter what. And from there, I think it's a lot easier to approach the question of like, what do I do with it, or like, where can this go? Yeah.
That's cool. I think that's a great idea. So what I'm hearing is like that is kind of like let yourself be inspired by ingredients.
Yeah, and like for example, like I'm also just like I don't buy carrots that often because I'm very like ambivalent about carrots, right? And it just feels like a chore to cook it. And so if I just fill my house with like things that I know that I like, it's a lot easier to like want to go into the kitchen and like do something with it.
I love that. I've got chicken breasts in my fridge right now that are languishing because I'm like, I should probably eat this, but I really don't want to. And I think you're totally right. I think like that is a nice way to think about like shopping for yourself in a way that encourages your cooking that you want to be doing.
Yeah, I think it's also just like, you know, you have to flop in order to make good food when you're right. Like for everything that I like post online that I think is good is like something that was like really bad and I just didn't say anything about it to anyone ever.
Totally, yeah.
So like, yeah, I think like accepting the mistakes and like for the most part, like it's not the end of the world if you eat a dinner that was like kind of bad.
Yeah, totally. Can feel like it. Wow. Well, we covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, we did. I like have never talked for like an hour about lumpia in my life, but I'm like, oh, I have a lot to say.
Yeah. Thank you so much. This has been amazing. I'm really like, I feel like you filled up my tool belt for future lumpia making, and also give me some stuff to like look out for when I have them in the wild.
Yeah, I hope it goes well.
I'm sure it will.
Well, that's the episode. I hope you learned a few things about lumpia. You've been listening to Taste. I'm your host, Cody Reiss. You can find me on Instagram at Cody Reiss and at To Taste Podcast. Our guest was Bettina Makalintal, who's on Instagram at CrispyEgg420. Our art was made by Bedbugs Pulpetti, and our music by Justin Kohlberg of Moonrun. If you like this podcast, you might also like my Substack, also called To Taste. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another short story.